Hello everyone and welcome back to another Project Gladiator in-depth weather forecast. Today I'll be covering the weather for April 22nd, 2024. For today we have a marginal risk for portions of southeastern Florida there across coastal regions, mainly including the Miami region as well as Fort Lauderdale. Risks for today do not really include that much of a tornado risk, but we do have the potential for some isolated damaging wind gusts and the potential for some isolated large hail. For tomorrow, we have a dual marginal threat setup, one for the Michigan region into portions of the Great Lakes there, as well as another marginal threat for portions of the southern Central Plains for northern northwest Texas into southern Oklahoma there. Risks for the southern marginal threat include a 5% damaging wind risk as well as a 5% hail risk. And the same goes for the marginal threat further up north in Michigan, where we won't really have that much of a tornado risk for tomorrow. And then for our day 3 outlook, we do have a marginal risk for Oklahoma into western and northern Texas there, where we could be watching for the potential for some isolated severe thunderstorms. And then this is where it really begins to ramp up. For our day 4 to day 8 outlook, we are expecting the potential for multiple days of severe thunderstorms, and some of which could definitely be significant. With our day 4 outlook, where we have a 15% for the Central Plains from Texas into southern Nebraska, and then we also have a much larger 15% into portions of the Midwest and the Central Plains for a day 5 outlook. And then for a day 6 outlook, we have another 15% for the Central Plains for southern Kansas, portions of Missouri and Arkansas, as well as Oklahoma in northern and central Texas there. And then we don't have anything for our day 7 to day 8 outlook. However, eventually we could definitely see the potential of a 15% being introduced for this region in particular. At least by the next outlook, it's definitely very plausible that we could have a new 15% there. So again, we are definitely in range and definitely expecting multiple days worth of potentially significant severe thunderstorms. Taking a look at our WPC outlook, starting off with the excessive rainfall forecast for today. Today, we don't have anywhere that we are currently watching for the potential of flash flooding. For tomorrow, we also don't have anywhere that we're watching for the area for flash flooding. Same with our day 3 outlook. But we do have a marginal risk for portions of the Midwest and the Central Plains for day 4 outlook, as well as a much broader marginal risk for a lot of the Midwest into the Central Plains on our day 5 outlook. And then for our winter weather outlooks for today, and for the majority of the week, we aren't really watching for all that much of a potential for heavy snowfall, but we could see the potential for some isolated heavy snowfall in elevated portions of the Rockies there. But overall, the risk for heavy snowfall will be limited to those elevated portions of the Rockies this week. Taking a look at our weather model, starting off with our 500 millibars as well as our surface observations and how those are going to work in conjunction with our risk for severe thunderstorms for today. As of right now, we do have a pretty powerful upper level trough here with the low pressure system all the way up in the Carolinas, but we have some fairly broad ejection and advection all the way down into the region of concern. And that's also pushing a cold front further down to the south across the Florida Peninsula, and that's going to be the main trigger for our risk for severe thunderstorms. However, with this pretty powerful trough overhead, that is definitely going to provide quite a lot of lift to support the risk for severe thunderstorms. With 500 millibars flow upwards of 60 to the upper 50 miles per hour, we are probably definitely going to see some pretty decent speed shear out of that, and that will definitely lead to a hail risk across this region. Taking a look at our upper level jet here, I'm not really going to pay too much attention to our risk for tornadoes across this region because we don't really have one, and we are expected to see a lot of speed shear and very little directional shear. I have already gone over the photographs, so we are expected to see very minimal directional shear, and that will be very limiting to a tornado risk, and we will likely not really see too much of a risk for tornadoes across this region. But as far as our speed shear goes, with our 200 millibar jet here, we are definitely seeing some pretty strong 200 millibar flow, upwards of 100, 109, 110, potentially even reaching 115, 117 in this region. And it is going to be fairly zonal, so we won't really have a whole lot of spreading of those isobars and wind vectors, so we won't really have that much lift in the upper levels of the atmosphere, but still, regardless, we will have a lot of speed shear to support the risk for hail across this region. Taking a look at our bulk shear and how that's going to support the risk for hail across this region, we are expected to see quite a lot of speed shear across this region, especially with how strong our 200 millibar jet is and how strong our 500 millibars is as well. We are definitely expected to see a very large amount of speed shear with bulk shear values that could potentially get upwards of 50 to 40 knots across this region, backing our main convective line, which will definitely be supportive of the potential for at least some isolated hail across this region. Taking a look at our composite reflectivity so we can go over some general radar analysis as well as our timing for our storms. As of right now, our storms are currently ongoing and we have a lot of convection out in the Atlantic as well, but we do have some storms that are currently ongoing ashore. And as far as our radar analysis goes, it is definitely going to be pretty messy, but a lot of these cells are definitely indicating the potential for at least some small hail. And because these storms are currently ongoing, we can also look at what is actually currently ongoing. So what is currently ongoing is that the majority of these storms don't exhibit as much hail as what our composite reflectivity is indicating, but they are definitely indicating the potential for at least some small hail across this region. So a lot of these storms will definitely have at least some hail with them, but it will probably be more of a damaging wind gust risk with additional risk for some hail. But overall, our speed shear is definitely probably going to be a little bit more of a dominating factor, as it is going to be leading or causing our composite reflectivity to indicate much larger hail across this region, despite our storms themselves not really having that much hail. Taking a look at our dew points and how that's going to affect our instability, we are expected to see some pretty decent moisture across this region, with dew point values are going to be getting upwards of the low 70s, which will definitely be very supportive of the potential for some pretty decent instability across this region, but it will depend on our temperatures. Taking a look at our temperatures and how that's going to affect our instability, we are definitely expected to see a lot of heat across this region as well, with temperatures that could potentially get upwards of the mid and potentially approaching the upper 80s and getting very close to 90. And coupled together with our very large amounts of moisture across this region, that will definitely make for very large amounts of instability across this region. Taking a look at our lapse rates and how that's going to affect our instability across this region, we are expected to have at least more than 0 lapse rates across this region, with lapse rates that are potentially going to get upwards of the mid to upper 60s and maybe approaching an isolated 7 in there. Overall, that's not really the best, but it is definitely more than 5, and will definitely aid with our instability quite a lot across this region. Taking a look at our most unstable cape and how that's going to fuel the risk for severe thunderstorms across this region. By the way, I will be skipping our surface-based cape because I'm not really too concerned about if these storms are going to be surface-based or not, because elevated storms can still produce the potential for some hail and some damaging wind gusts, and we are not really concerned about tornadoes. But as far as our most unstable cape goes, we definitely have some pretty decent instability across this region. It's probably going to be a little bit lower than the 3000s just because we don't really have the best lapse rates, but we definitely have some pretty decent instability, and will definitely be sufficient enough to fuel the risk for severe thunderstorms, the potential for some isolated large hail, and the potential for some damaging wind gusts. With cape values upwards of the 2000s and approaching the mid 2000s, that will definitely be sufficient enough to fuel the risk for severe thunderstorms across this region. Taking a look at our 0 to 3 kilometer instability and how that's going to aid in the risk for severe thunderstorms across this region, we are definitely expected to see a pretty big pool of some pretty decent 0 to 3 kilometer instability across this region, with 0 to 3 kilometer cape values that could range anywhere from 130 to 170, which will definitely aid in the overall risk for severe thunderstorms across this region. Taking a look at our damaging wind gust models and how that will indicate the risk for damaging wind gusts across this region. Again, just as a reminder, we aren't expected to see anything too crazy. We do have a 5% risk for damaging wind gusts, which indicates the potential for some marginally strong, isolated damaging wind gusts, with wind gusts that could potentially get upwards of 20 miles per hour with storms that are across this region. So we aren't really expected to see anything crazy. However, further out to sea, we could potentially see wind gusts upwards of 40 miles per hour, which is definitely going to be a big uptick compared to shore. So if you are planning on going out, especially in a small craft, definitely make sure you are taking the necessary precautions for that. Because those waters could definitely be quite dangerous with wind gusts that strong. Taking a look at our large hail parameter, I'm not really going to go through the rest of our hail parameters for today because this is an overall lower end risk for hail, but our large hail parameter is indicating the potential for some isolated large hail across this region. For the region of concern across the Miami region, further inland towards just to the south of the lake lake, the largest lake with the name that I just can't pronounce for the life of me, as well as it also indicating an area back towards the Key region, which is a little interesting. So we are definitely still seeing the potential for some isolated large hail across this region with some of these storms that are ongoing. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator and join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. If you live in any of the areas I covered for today, please stay weather alert for the time being. If you notice anything might have been wrong this forecast or would like to make a suggestion or ask a question, please leave a comment. 3 other channels I highly suggest you check out are One Nation Weather Watcher, and JaxonWX, and hopefully I'll be able to see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.